Welcome back to Northwest Elite Spirit, the channel you come to train your mind, body, and spirit. I'm Coach Brian. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do that now and make sure to ring the notification bell to stay up to date on all of my newest releases. This is Your Enemy is Your Ally, from Encounters with the Nagual, Conversations with Carlos Castaneda by Armando Torres, from the chapter Stalking the Petty Tyrant. In spite of Carlos's explanations, the practical aspect of stalking continued to be, from my point of view, one of the darkest themes in his teachings. Over the years, I accomplished some of the exercises, like recapitulation and inner silence. I even dreamt. But when I tried stalking, I only got ambiguous results or wound up feeling ridiculous. Apparently, Carlos was aware of my efforts because at one point he called me and told me, "Do not get complicated. You're making a caricature of things. If you want to stalk, observe yourself. We are all excellent hunters. Stalking is a natural gift. When hunger presses us, we sharpen ourselves. Children cry and achieve what they want. Women entrap men, and men get even with each other by swindling in business. Stalking is to be able to get away with what you want. If you become aware of the world you live in, you will understand that simply staying attentive to it is a kind of stalking. Since we learned to stalk long before our capacity to discriminate was developed, we feel it as something perfectly natural, and we hardly ever question it. So all our actions, even the most altruistic, are imbued with the hunter's spirit. Ordinary man does not know he is stalking because his character has been subjugated by socialization. Man is convinced that his existence is important, so his actions are at the service of his self-importance and not the expansion of his awareness. Carlos added that one of the characteristics of self-importance is that it betrays us. He said, "Important people do not flow. They give themselves airs and show off their attributes. They lack the necessary grace and the speed to hide because their luminosity is too rigid. They can only achieve flexibility when they no longer have anything to defend." The stalking method of sorcerers consists of focusing on the reality we live in, but in a new way. Rather than just accumulating information, what sorcerers seek is to compact their energy. Carlos said, "A warrior is someone who has learned to stalk himself and is no longer burdened with a heavy image to present to others. Nobody can detect him if he does not want them to, because he does not have attachments. A warrior is above the hunter because he has learned to laugh at himself." Carlos told me how his instructor, Donna Florinda Matus, taught him to be inconspicuous. Carlos told me, "Just at the time when my books transformed me into a rich man, Florinda sent me to fry hamburgers in a highway restaurant. For years, I worked with my money in plain sight, but without being able to spend it. She said that would teach me not to lose the appropriate perspective, and I learned my lesson." Sometime after that, I was given another opportunity to be invisible. I had taken some cactuses to the house of a friend and began to plant them. Suddenly, 2 reporters from the Times who had spent a long time trying to find me appeared. They figured I was a peon and asked for the owner of the house, and I pointed at the door and told them, "Knock there." My friend answered their questions saying, "No, I have not seen him," and the reporters left wondering where the hell Castaneda could be. Carlos went on saying that since the problem of self-importance is a personal matter, each warrior should adapt the teachings to his own conditions. Therefore, the stalking techniques are extremely flexible, But the training is the same for everyone in that it concerns getting rid of superfluous routines and in acquiring enough discipline to recognize the signs of intent. Both achievements constitute true feats of character. Carlos said, "The best way of acquiring that degree of discipline is to deal actively with a petty tyrant." In response to my queries, Carlos explained that a petty tyrant is someone who makes our life impossible. In past times, this kind of people could hurt us physically or even kill us. Nowadays, that kind of petty tyrants practically do not exist. However, due to the high level of importance that we grant ourselves, anyone in a position of bothering us works as a petty tyrant. And far from avoiding it, we should face not the petty tyrant, but our own stupidity. Carlos said, "The petty tyrant is necessary because most of us are too lazy to change by ourselves. A petty tyrant moves the fixation of me and makes our weaknesses appear. A petty tyrant makes us see the truth that we are not important, and the tyrant is willing to demonstrate it with actions. Learning how to deal with the petty tyrant is the only really effective way to refine stalking. A petty tyrant is so important for that task, it can become an obsession for an apprentice to look for one and get in touch with one. A sincere gratitude is the only appropriate feeling for a warrior who has found a petty tyrant to fit his measure. Petty tyrants are plentiful. What is not plentiful is the guts to look for them or to establish a connection with them by means of stalking, or the guts to incite their anger and put oneself within their reach while at the same time scheming devastating strategies. Instead, we spend our lives running away from situations that produce pain, irritation, fear, or confusion. In that way, we lose one of the most valuable tools that the Spirit has put in our path. I asked, "What is the strategy to confront that kind of enemies?" Carlos replied, "Above all, do not see them as enemies. They are involuntary allies in your cause. Do not lose sight of the fact that the battle is not fought for the ego, but for energy. The important thing is that you win, not that the other one loses. A petty tyrant does not know that, and that is his or her weakness." Although I was never given an encounter of the exquisite quality that my teacher Don Juan had with a petty tyrant, I did have the privilege of dealing with several of this kinds of persons. Carlos told me that when his apprenticeship began, his main impediment to approaching the art of stalking was impatience. To help him, Don Juan once demanded that he establish a friendship with a certain person who lived in an old age home. Carlos said, "When I met this man, he turned out to be an annoying old man who was in the habit of telling everyone how in his youth in the 1920s he had been witness to a spectacular event. He had been sitting in an Italian coffee shop. Suddenly, a car stopped in front of the door, and out of the car came several people armed with machine guns. They began to shoot towards the establishment, but thanks to his lucky star, my old friend hid under some tables and was unhurt." The anecdote apparently constituted the only treasure in the old man's life. Unfortunately for us who knew him, the old man suffered from amnesia and was always forgetting whom he had told it to. I had to suffer through it again and again for years. Every time I arrived at the retirement home, he would invariably cling to my arm and wonder aloud, "Did I ever tell you how I was attacked by some gangsters?" I felt pity for him because somehow he made me think of my own uncertain future. But towards the end, I had enough. I returned to Don Juan and told him, "I cannot stand this old man anymore. He is really infuriating. What is the point of making me visit him?" Don Juan was inflexible. He ordered that, starting from that day, I had to go visit the old man every day or give up my apprenticeship. Alarmed by his threat, I gathered all of my patience and continued the task. Sometimes I fantasized, thinking of the possibility that the old man was not the person he seemed to be. That gave me encouragement to continue with my task. One day when I arrived at the retirement home and asked for my friend, they informed me that he had died.